Thank you very much. First, let's get a quick round of applause for Vinny and Savannah for putting this all together. Yeah. Cool. Well, my name is Taylor Pearson. I'm going to be talking today about the safety and sanity of entrepreneurship. So here's a quote from Steve Jobs. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes. Who's heard a quote like this? You know, entrepreneurs are these crazy people. They go out and do these bold, audacious things, and against the odds, they succeed. Does that sound like a familiar script? So I'm going to make the opposite argument, that because of the changes that have been going on in the last 10, 15 years, entrepreneurship is the safest, sanest career choice for the 21st century. So here's what I'm going to talk about. Why automation and globalization mean that jobs, as we traditionally understand them, are becoming more competitive and less profitable. Why entrepreneurship is the safest, sanest, most responsible career path in the 21st century. And how you can use the stair-step framework to increase your chances of entrepreneurial success. And so I'm going to start. This is a picture of me about 5 years ago. I'm with some friends from college, and with the exception of me, everyone in this picture had a good job. An accountant, a doctor, PR agency, financial advisor. And this is a picture of me about a year and a half ago. And no one in this picture has a job. One runs an info publishing business, one runs a SaaS business, one has a cognitive enhancement podcast, and web design studio, and then there's me. And I was sitting at this conference. It took place in Bangkok, Thailand in 2014. We were sitting at breakfast the day after this photo was taken. We were talking about, how do you explain to someone who has grown up in a very traditional environment, that's, an accountant or a financial advisor, some of my friends back here, what it's like to follow this alternative script. What does it look like to follow the entrepreneurial life script? We all know the doctor script and the lawyer script and the accountant script, but what does this script look like? And so that was something I'd spent about 5 years trying to figure out. I had gone to work for a small entrepreneurial company. We had 3 product lines. This one was portable bars. This is at an event in Orlando, and you can see I was too cheap to buy dress shoes. I'm wearing my sneakers to the trade show. And I worked with them for about 3 years. And I saw this big disparity that, at a time, this was about 2011, 2014, when a lot of my friends were struggling to keep their jobs, struggling to find jobs, very grateful for cost of living raises, that there was this whole group of entrepreneurs. I talked to people all around the world whose businesses were growing quickly, who had a lot of freedom and independence in their lifestyles, and also ability to achieve, income growth very quickly. And so I'm going to talk about why that is, and the one word I kind of want to keep in mind is this idea of leverage. That when things get more difficult, kind of our natural inclination is to try harder. You can imagine this guy trying to pick up the boulder instead of just picking up the stick. So the commoditization of credentialism. This is from a report put out by Kleiner Perkins, Caulfield, and Byers, and the headline up there is all you need to pay attention to. Since 2000, population grew 2.4 times faster than jobs. From 1948 to 2000, the opposite was the case. Jobs grew faster than population. So I think we've hit this inflection point, and I want to talk about Megan Parker. Megan was in a New York Times article that came out last year. She's a receptionist at a law firm in Atlanta. She made $37,000 a year, and she had over $100,000 in student debt, and she was very grateful for that position. She'd been working in retail, churning out applications, trying to get it. And so this isn't the notion we have about how the kind of typical career script should work, to take on that kind of debt, to do that amount of work, to get in a position where you don't feel like you have a lot of options. So what's happened? One is the cost of traditional education has gone way up, right? We think healthcare has gotten expensive. College has gotten expensive twice as fast as healthcare. It's also gotten less valuable. Goldman Sachs put out a report that the ROI on a college degree, even as the cost is going up, the return is going down. And so why is that? And 2 forces I want to talk about. One is globalization. This is a market, and it's called Bintan Market. It's in downtown Ho Chi Minh City. When we think of the developing world, this is kind of the image we have in our heads, right? It's shopkeepers, and they're selling like trinkets and cheap electronics, and that's true. This is taken recently. What we don't often think about is this is a co-working space 5 blocks away. That could be in Tampa, it could be anywhere else, and this is young Vietnamese people. I spoke at an event at a college in Vietnam, people whose grandparents had grown up in rice paddies, unable to read, were JavaScript programmers, that is how quickly things have changed. And suddenly everyone has access to these people. I work with someone in the Philippines, I work with someone in Vietnam. Who has ever made a Skype call or a free voice over IP call, right? I remember 10 years ago being in Paris, trying to call back to the US, and I had like the scratch-off phone card. It's like $3 a minute, and you can like barely hear the person. And now it's Skype, it's Google Hangouts, it's all these tools. So we had this huge, globally educated workforce. From the beginning of human history until 2000, there were 90 million college graduates. In just the period from 2000 to 2010, we added another 40 million. But that's how much this has exploded. And they're now very accessible. The other force I want to talk about here is automation. So software is eating the world. This was a quip by Mark Andreessen, the founder of Netscape, who's now a venture capitalist, which sounds really cool, but what does it mean to say software is eating the world? One is just access to the internet. So in 2004, there were 50 million people that had access to broadband internet. By 2014, there were 2 billion. Again, this happened very, very quickly. The other is these amazing efficiency gains, right? You look at Blockbuster and Netflix. Both provided basically the same service. You want to watch a movie in your house. Blockbuster had 60,000 employees. Netflix has 2,000. And a lot of people would say, you prefer Netflix to Blockbuster. They're offering a better service with, 3% of the number of jobs. And this is something we chronically underestimate. AT&T hired McKinsey in 1980 to predict how many cell phone users there would be in the year 2000. So McKinsey got all their team together, they did this big study and interviewed people and looked at all this data, and they predicted there were going to be 100,000 cell phone users in 2000. There were 100 million. They were off by orders of magnitude. You got the smartest people in a room trying to figure out how fast technology is going to move, off by orders of magnitude. So again, this notion of leverage, the leverage points, are changing. And here's kind of the framework I use to explain this to people. This is called the Cynefin framework. It was developed by a guy working with IBM. It starts here in the bottom right with simple. And what's happening is work, and the kind of work that's in demand is moving around counterclockwise this framework that, 100 years ago, most people did what we would call simple work with best practices. They worked agricultural, industrial, in a farm, in a factory where you could be told, there's A, B, C. You imagine putting together an IKEA furniture, right? You know what to do next. Over the course of the 20th century, we transitioned into complicated work. This is work where there's a good practice, but you kind of need to figure it out. And that's what most of our education and professional system is around, right? They're going to teach you the basics of accounting. They're going to teach you the basics of medicine, whatever field you're in. And then you're going to have to adapt a little bit, but you kind of get that base early on in your training. And what we're doing now is we're shifting into the complex order, where it's a constant learning experience. It's an emergent practice. This is all new, and the people that are in demand are people that are not doing complicated work anymore, but complex work. So, the sanity and safety of entrepreneurship. I want to kind of tell an example of how this has changed. This is the New York Times. They have about 3,500 people on staff. This is their downtown Manhattan office building. This is their website. The New York Times gets about 65 million visitors per month. This is James Clear. He's one of my favorite bloggers. He writes about motivation and willpower and habits. He's one person. He works from home. James gets about 1 million visitors per month to his website, which he started 3 years ago. So think about the differences here, that the New York Times gets 4,500 visitors to their website per employee. James gets 1 million. If James wanted to start a newspaper 100 years ago, he couldn't do that, right? He had to buy printing presses. He had to buy delivery trucks. He had to hire a staff of reporters. And, a printing press is now a website. A delivery truck is now Facebook or Twitter or email. These are where things are shifting. So again, coming back to this notion of leverage, all of a sudden, James has leverage. 100 years ago, he did not. Now he does. And I want to kind of stick this notion of risk, that I think we always come back to this notion of this is risky, this is dangerous, but that's changed, right? What we're talking about here is that what used to be risky is no longer risky. What used to be safe is now risky. And if you do things that are safe but feel risky, you gain a significant advantage in the marketplace. What James did is he very much moved into this complex domain, right? There's no course you can take. There's no one that told him, how do you get right for 1 million people a month about motivation and habits and willpower? This was something he had to figure out. How do I write the articles? How do I distribute the articles? What's my positioning? What's my website design like? These were all complex, emergent tasks. And so how do you do this? How does someone, train in entrepreneurship? Right? We're used to, if you want to train in complicated work, you go and you get a particular degree in a particular field that you want to learn about. What does it look like to do that for entrepreneurship? Is it a skill set you can develop? And I very much think it is. This is a guy I profile in my book. His name is Rob Walling. He's here with his wife, Sherry. And Rob is a very impressive guy, in my opinion. He has a book called Start Small, Stay Small for developers that want to launch products. He runs an email marketing tool called Drip that's software as a service. It's in a very competitive marketplace. He's doing quite well. It's grown very quickly in the past 2 years. So I think we see this and we kind of think, well, Rob just popped out of the womb and he was a very entrepreneurial. He was probably selling lemonade at age 12. That's not actually the case. So who knows what this is? Does anyone know? It's a duck hunter, and he is in a duck boat. So Rob's first product, he was working in a corporate job at the time. He wrote a book, he researched it, on how to build your own duck boat. So how do you buy the flat-bottom boat? How do you camouflage it? How do you put it together? And he put it for sale on his website. He taught himself how to make a website, and he started selling duck boat ebooks. He is, to my knowledge, the world's leading authority on duck boat ebooks. As far as I know, there's no one yet that has written a better duck boat ebook than he had. And so what he did is he picked a market that wasn't very competitive, duck boat ebooks. He was the only one. And he started to develop these kind of entrepreneurial. He learned about web technologies, and he learned about search engine optimization, and he learned about payment processors. And then he went on and he started building wedding websites for people. This was back in the mid-2000s when there weren't these wedding website builders. So he would charge people $500 or $1,000, and he would build them websites for their wedding. He started a job board for electricians, helping electricians find other jobs in their city. And then he moved up a step. This was his first software product. It was called .NET Invoice. Do not ask me what .NET invoicing is. I don't know. Again, it's a very niche, very specific topic, but he started to make some more and more money, and actually got to the point where he'd replaced his traditional income. He moved on to another product. This is an SEO tool, which he bought from the profits of his earlier business and fixed up. And now he's on Drip. And what he realized looking back is that he went through these stair steps, that just as you don't walk out and run a marathon on the first day, you run a mile, and then you take a day off, and then you run 2 miles, and then you take a day off, and you run 3 miles. The same progression is how he had become a better entrepreneur. So starting with a simple product in an uncompetitive market, and gradually moving up. And Rob wasn't the first person to see entrepreneurialism and entrepreneurship as a skill set. This is Peter Drucker, the founder of management theory. Everyone who can face up to decision-making can learn to be an entrepreneur and to behave entrepreneurially. Entrepreneurship, then, is behavior rather than personality trait. So I know some of you are probably thinking, well, yeah, this is all great, but what about the 9 out of 10 businesses fail? And I think that's about true. This is a guy I profile in the book named Dan Norris. Over a 12-month period, he started 6 businesses, 5 of them failed, so he was just slightly better than the statistic. The difference is we now live in an age where failure is really, really cheap, right? When you had to lease a storefront, when you had to buy tons of physical products, when it cost tens of thousands of dollars, failure was expensive. When you have to set up a website with a domain name and a host that's $100, failure's cheap. So Dan failed 83% of the time. He still had a record-breaking year in terms of the business and his personal income. And I want to leave you with this quote from Seth Godin, which is, people get entrepreneurial block for only one reason. It is not because they are not passionate, it is not because they are not qualified, it is because they are afraid. You need to be clear with yourself about what you are afraid of, why you are afraid, and whether you care enough to dance with the fear, because it will never go away. So I hope you will all choose to dance with the fear. Thank you very much. Any questions? I think there's certainly distinctions. I think some people really are born and bred entrepreneurs. I think some people pop out of the womb and are selling lemonade at age 10. And I think those kind of people have always existed. I think what's changed now, and I was by no means one of those people. I think I was hardworking, I was industrious. But I wouldn't have, if I looked at myself at 18 or 22, I wouldn't have called myself particularly entrepreneurial. And I think that's part of the story of the age we live in now, right? That had I been born 50 years ago, I don't think I would have become an entrepreneur. But that the tools have become so accessible, and the alternatives have become worse and worse. That's kind of the direction people are moving in. Does that answer your question? Sales and marketing, I would say. I think a lot of people talk about, programming, everyone needs to learn to program, everyone needs to learn to code. I think sales and marketing is the skill set of the future more than programming. If you think about, the way we traditionally organize work is in corporations, right? So if you work in a company and you work at 3 companies over the course of your career, you only have 3 sales transactions, right? You got to sell yourself to the company 3 different times. As that starts to fragment, right? We have the free agent economy and all these buzzwords you hear. You're selling and marketing yourself all the time, right? You're to new clients, to potential vendors, psychology, persuasion, all that stuff. I think that's the most important thing. And to use Rob's example again, part of the reason he picked Duckboat ebooks was there was a high search volume and low competition for it in Google. So there's a Google tool he could go see what the answer said. He started learning how to market through this channel, and then slowly added other channel. Then he learned pay-per-click marketing, sales, started to build out that marketing toolbox. Yeah, I think there's certainly a judgment call there. I think there's a couple questions. One is, how long is the dip? So there's a concept from Seth Godin, he calls it the dip. And different projects have different dips, right? So if you want to start kind of a freelancing on the side thing with you already understand web design, that project's going to have a small dip, right? It's going to be hard for a shorter period of time because you're doing it on the side. It's not your livelihood doesn't depend on it. It's a skill set you already have. If you've never done anything with technology and you want to launch a SaaS app platform that's going to be the next Facebook, it's going to have a very long dip. There's going to be years and years and years and years before you know if that product's going to work. Regardless, it's going to take a long time to figure that out. So I think knowing how long the dip is, and I think starting with pick projects with short dips, like when you start, pick projects that you can get through the dip quickly. And I think to your other point, how do you know when it's failed? I think part of it's intuitive, and you just develop it over time. But I think one way a lot of people, and to Dan's point, he would try one thing for 2 or 3 months, and then he would start another thing, and then one took off. And I see that happen with a lot of people, that side projects take off, and eventually there's something that just catches momentum and moves faster. Well, in Dan's case specifically, and I'm trying to remember the numbers, but in the first 2 months, 5 of those projects made $1,000 or less. 1 made $20,000. So it's pretty clear which one had the momentum, right? All of a sudden one of them hit and everyone was like, yes, I want this. I guess from my perspective, the bigger problem is not people that quit early, but people that never start. And so I think this methodology, and the reason I think it's valuable is it gives people a place to get started. And there's a lot of intangibles here. I think the idea, people talk a lot about product market fit, but there's also founder market fit. Are you a good founder for this particular market? Do you care about the people in the marketplace? Do you understand the market? A lot of those things you don't figure out until you get started. Yeah, so if you think about the way work is organized now, the way work was organized over the 20th century, we had big corporations come in and centralize things. So as a professional, during your professional career, you usually have to make a very few sales interactions, which are you selling yourself to a company saying, come hire me. As that sort of starts to dissolve, right, we go to this free agent economy, all of a sudden you're making sales and you're doing marketing all the time. That how everyone is a media company is one of the kind of ways people describe this, that you're constantly marketing and selling and positioning yourself. I work in a lot of coffee shops. I've met lots and lots of great programmers sitting in coffee shops that can't get their business off the ground because they don't know how to sell it. I've never met a guy that said, I have this huge demand of this thing I can sell, but I can't find anyone to make it for me. That guy always solves that problem really quickly. I'll make a book recommendation that probably made the biggest impact on me, which is The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. One of my favorite books, The War of Art. Art, A-R-T, yeah. And what he talks about in there is, I think this feeling that almost everyone I've ever talked to that's read the book relates to, which is we have this thing, he calls it the resistance, that everyone feels, that before you take a project and you show it to the world, you have this sense of, if people reject this project, they reject me, that this isn't somehow challenging to my identity. And that's a battle, that's a creative battle that everyone faces, and he talks about how do you overcome that.